I've rewatched Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul at least 5 times, and each time I watch them I feel like I learned something new. The genius or the writer and creator Vince Gilligan is something to admire. Having said that, I was extremely excited to see his upcoming show Pluribus. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Usually when I decide to watch a show, I wait for the entire season to be out because I'm a binge-watch enthusiast. But with Pluribus, I couldn't wait, so I watched the first 2 episodes in one sitting. And oh boy, there are so many things to unpack. Now, for anyone who hasn't seen the show, spoiler warning, you have been warned. If you have seen the show or you just don't care about spoilers, let's continue. Funny thing is, I haven't seen any trailers or promotional material for the show because I feel like trailers in general spoil movies for me, but that's a discussion that could be a video of its own. I didn't know what to expect. I only saw that Rhea Seehorn was cast in the lead role. In my mind, I conjured this image that the show was some sort of sequel to Breaking Bad, following the life of Kim Wexler. However, the moment I played the first episode, in the first 30 seconds, I realized that's not the case, and that this was going to be some kind of sci-fi adventure. Honestly, I was so excited. Vince doing something new, no more Breaking Bad spin-offs, I love it. I dislike when something popular gets 30 spin-offs like Squid Game is bound to do. So we got all these new characters and setting, but something was off. The characters, none of them actually had any dimension, which was weird because, again, in Breaking Bad, everyone was decently fleshed out even the first episode. But the main character in the first sequence was not its characters, but the ominous alien discovery. The tension was done great, and I didn't know what to expect. The countdown, genius. I was hooked. And I think that most characters being flat is something done for a good reason, because soon pretty much everyone becomes one person and loses their individuality. It wouldn't make much sense to flesh them out because the main character of this show is not a singular person, but the unity of all humankind. We're introduced to our main character, Carol. She's a writer who writes books that she thinks are garbage, but she has a fan base and makes a decent living. She's obviously uninterested in everything in her life except for one thing, her best friend slash lover slash colleague. We get a bit of insight into their relationship, and we see that she makes Carol feel fulfilled. But then, madness strikes down with no remorse. Everyone starts seizuring in this masterfully done sequence. Bravo, Vince. Carol tries to make a run for it with her friend, but it is soon revealed that every single human being was affected by whatever this anomaly was. When the people started waking up, man, it was creepy. I was genuinely scared. Rhea's performance really showcased how any of us would feel if something like this actually happened. But when they all started speaking in unison, I immediately thought of that one Rick and Morty episode and thought to myself, wait, I know this premise, this isn't original, but alright, I'll give it a shot, because when you think about it, Breaking Bad isn't that original either. It's a story about a man gone bad, but it's unique, and there's a difference. For example, most music isn't original. All music uses the same chords and rhythm patterns, but the artist makes it unique. I was just weirded out for a moment because I didn't know what to expect. Was this going to be a zombie show? What is happening? But no, we got Body Snatchers, written by Vince Gilligan, which is something I'd personally invest in. The pilot episode ends with Carol talking to some kind of a senator, or rather to everyone at the same time. I'll call them Unity, like in the Rick and Morty episode for simplicity's sake. Unity explains that pretty much every person in the world is now combined, all intelligence and thought united, seeking to make the world perfect, and they do so instantly. What with a casualty? You see, Carol's partner and many others couldn't survive the transition, but for a brief moment, they were part of the unity. What's rather creepy is that this villain is unlike what you'd expect. You'd think that they want to dominate or conquer, but they're actually pretty zen. All crimes cease to exist, prisons are emptied, and everyone has a role. Everyone except Carol, because she, for some reason, was immune to unity. After completing the first episode, I was truly confused, but not in a bad way, more in a I need answers kind of way. I immediately played the second episode, and the premise is that there are another 12 people in the world who are also immune like Carol. 5 of the others speak English, and Carol demands to speak with them. They all meet up, and what I want to mention is something brilliant. Since everyone is now one person and they treat all immunes as gods, they grant all of their wishes. So this dude flies in with Air Force One and a whole bunch of chicks. Honestly, if something like that happened in real life, I'd abuse it like that fellow. Obviously, Unity wants all of the immunes to also become a part of them, but interestingly, they don't come across as villains. However, Carol does. You see, every time she insults Unity, every person in the world starts having a seizure. That means casualties. Because pilots crash, everyone driving gets into accidents. Carol, with her words, does a lot of damage. She causes them from 2 seizures and eliminates approximately 20 million lives, which is insane. But what I find interesting is that Unity doesn't hurt Carol back. No, it wants to be her friend. It still complies with her wishes and talks to her in a friendly way, which from the perspective of an all-powerful being makes no sense. Like Unity could just ignore Carol because it has 7 billion souls under its control, and yet it still finds Carol important. If you like this kind of content, I'd really appreciate if you like the video and subscribe to my channel. This is actually my first video, and if you have any suggestions to what videos you'd like to see, comment below. We learned that Unity cannot harm a living being. It can't even make decisions that would hurt someone's feelings. It's going to be interesting to see how Unity will force Carol to become one of them, because if Carol doesn't want to, they can't really do anything about it, since that would hurt her feelings. So this show's villain might not be Unity, but rather Carol's effect on Unity in the long run. Carol is pretty much an alcoholic, or at least she turns to drinks when moments become stressful. And she loses her temper quite often, especially when things don't go her way. The other 5 immune people we meet are kind of useless, but I think that's the point. Their mention in the prior episode was supposed to give Carol hope, and discovering that those individuals don't actually mind this happening kind of strips away her hope even more. In the end, she really is left to her own devices. When you think about it, Carol and Unity are sort of like a normal person and ChatGPT, an all-knowing entity available and personalized for every individual. It's that same eerie dynamic of complete understanding but zero individuality. I watched both episodes and honestly, it was great. A familiar premise but with a twist. So like every person in the world, I wanted to see what other people thought about it. So I went to the most healthy website in the world, Reddit. And the reviews were mixed at best. One person said that the things that happened in the first 2 episodes could have been an entire season. How is Vince going to make this work? Everyone doubting this new show. I really don't understand, people. Why would you judge something so soon? It's literally 2 episodes written by a great writer. No matter what you do, people will always think you're failing until you succeed. Which is kind of funny because Carol could pretty much represent an average Redditor, and Unity would be a representation of humanity if we had faith. Anyways, I'm appalled that people have no faith in anything new. But I don't care. I loved the show. I love how everything happened at once in the first episode. If you think about it, Breaking Bad's first episode had way too much content. It's a pilot, it has to sell you on it. Perhaps people were expecting an apocalypse show where Unity taking over would last episodes or even seasons. But this show obviously isn't about that. This show has 2 characters, Carol and Unity, an individual and everyone. The setup was rushed through because it wasn't important. It just needed to set up the next thing, and that thing is the interesting dynamic we've never seen before. Well, unless you count that Rick and Morty episode. People talking about how Vince Gilligan can't or shouldn't do something sci-fi and that he should stick to grounded stories is hilarious, because before Breaking Bad, he was a writer for the X-Files. Personally, I think Pluribus is going to be a great show that will focus on human psyche, loneliness, and unity. There are obviously so many unanswered questions. Who sent those signals from outer space? How did they spread throughout the world? There's so much to uncover. I'm impatiently waiting for all the flashbacks and background stories about Unity and Carol. I'd also love to see a scene where that Air Force guy was once homeless and Unity completely transformed his life. I just can't wait for the next episode and the one after that. Thanks for watching.